Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 3, Episode 11. This one's going to 11, Steve.
Ooh.
I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
You know, Steve, I wanted to start this episode by reminding our viewers and our listeners to subscribe. Subscribe to our podcast on their favorite platform and smash that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Now, why do you think I'm mentioning this right off the top? Well, of course, it's because of our very special guest, Robbie Kellman Baxter, the guru around subscriptions and membership program.
Yeah, it's a nice segue.
You brought her to my attention. She's in your book, right? You mentioned her and the whole subscription thing in your book, right? Part of being remarkable, right?
Yeah, I ran into her work. I think it was on doing the second edition of the book, and in chapter the chapter on Essential Number 7, Memorable, where I go through a list of ways to be memorable. One of them is to build a membership or subscription model, as well as the so-called Rundle, recurring revenue stream. So as we talk about in the interview, it's not like clubs or membership or loyalty programs or subscriptions are new, but the way they have gone to a whole new level, I think both as thinking about it from a strategy standpoint and solving a broader set of customer issues, but the technology to do these things. And I think retailers' appreciation of having that direct relationship with the customer, having the data and being able to leverage it. So yeah, it's just gone to a whole new level. So I'm glad that I went down that rabbit hole a little bit in the book. And then, it's great to have her on.
We'll get to that interview right after. Of course, we start with what's on your mind with the news. Let's start with this BBY new membership program. What's going on there?
Well, this is also a nice coincidence, but Best Buy announced this week a new membership program, which I think is called Total Tech, something like that. It's $199.95 a year, and there's a whole bundle of benefits. The one that kind of got the most play in the news is this special access to difficult to find products, which in light of the supply chain challenges is I guess more newsworthy. But there's a set of things: free shipping and installation, free delivery, longer delivery windows, special deals, a number of things that are really kind of layered, or a whole new layer of things on top of some of the benefits they had tied to their credit card. And it's pretty interesting, follows very much in terms of what we talk about in the interview, seemed to be pretty well received by the analyst community in Wall Street. So they've been testing it, I guess, for a while, and now they're rolling it out.
Speaking of interesting days, our friends at Macy's have been up to some shenanigans, or at least some folks who have investments in Macy's want them to do some shenanigans. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I feel like we may be getting this story every few weeks. So this investment group is pressuring, encouraging, perhaps is a nicer way of saying it, that Macy's should consider doing a Saks, spinning off its e-commerce business from its physical store business. You know, we've talked about this. I think generally speaking, those in the financial community think this is genius. You know, take advantage of the growth in e-commerce, take advantage of the really kind of crazy multiples, in my opinion, on .com businesses, and kind of,
what could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong, right? But it really fights against this whole narrative of the channels blurring and the recognition that customers shop in both channels. So I think from a strategy standpoint, a business strategy, long-term perspective, it's nuts. I don't get it at all. From a financial markets, being opportunistic and perhaps not having any better ideas on how to improve your business performance, this could happen. But I don't think Macy's has responded formally. But I think given the pressures that are out there and given stagnant performance, who knows? Maybe they'll pursue it.
So some other interesting news between some two big players, Home Depot and Walmart. And if I get this right, Walmart is going to be doing deliveries for Home Depot. Do I have that right?
That's right. Walmart has this program called Go Local, which is basically a last mile delivery program. And they have started to offer it as a service to other retailers. It's not clear how many other customers they have, because there's a sense that there are a bunch of smaller retailers, kind of like if Fulfilled by Amazon, concept.
Yeah.
This is fulfilled by Walmart, but with local delivery drivers. But Home Depot is, as far as we know, the first big retailer to sign up for it. So I think it's interesting for a couple reasons. One is, which is probably a whole other episode, I just feel like the same day, next day delivery wars just continue to escalate. And Amazon has been obviously kind of raising the stakes on this for a while. Yeah. And they have hundreds of, I forget the exact number, but they have facilities that are positioned such that they can do same day, next day delivery. And they have, their own vehicles and then these flex drivers that do delivery. So a lot of retailers are being compelled, I guess, to figure out how to better do next day, same day delivery, but they don't have the infrastructure necessarily. So they've been mostly leveraging their stores and putting together these local delivery drivers. So that's a strategy of Walmart's in general. And it's interesting that Home Depot is signing up to do this instead of kind of building up their capacity. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see both how much more activity happens on the part of these big retailers to develop these capabilities. I also think it's just interesting to look at Walmart because they're starting to operate more as kind of a platform business with their marketplace and some of these other services. So more to come there, I suspect. But it's a pretty interesting move.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So here in Canada, we had some unfortunate news with someone I know. Mark McEwen had a grocery store and he had a restaurant business, and he went into protection. He declared bankruptcy. Now he got unlucky. One of his biggest locations where he put a lot of money into for the store, Eataly, opened up down the block, and then it was in a big office building / residential. And of course, all the office people disappeared. So just a victim of bad timing. He's a great restaurateur and operator. Now, but what struck me was, and it's something you mentioned as well, is we don't really haven't heard a lot about retail bankruptcies. They've kind of, gone quiet. Is this the calm before the storm, or what's happening here?
Unfortunately, I suspect it is. So there were quite a lot of retail bankruptcies even before the pandemic. And then the first year of the pandemic, we saw a pretty big uptick, both with big retailers like Penny's and Neiman Marcus and others, as well as small ones. And kind of the same, I guess, trend in store closings. But this interesting thing happened that instead of all the store closings that were predicted, I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Coresight predicted 25,000 store closings last year, ended up being more like 8,000. Green Street Advisors predicted that half the mall anchors in the U.S. would close within 2 years. And so we've got about 12 weeks for hundreds of stores to be shuttered. So I don't think that's very likely to
I don't
happen.
think that's on the horizon.
And then similarly, I think, the pace of bankruptcies has really slowed and it's surprised people. What I think is going on is two things. One, which is more perhaps profound perspective, is I do think one of the things that has happened by virtue of COVID is more retailers have come to appreciate the role of stores in all their business, the curbside pickup, the ship from store. So I think there is actually where the narrative, as we've talked about before, was, well, online's growing and that really comes at the expense of physical retail. That is certainly sometimes true. But what's been true for a lot of retailers is that they actually need their physical stores to make digital work. So I think there is this realization, and that's kind of, caused people to maybe tap on the brakes a little bit in terms of store closing. The thing that I think is more of a near-term phenomenon is both at least in the U.S., the amount of government stimulus that has propped up spending, which will eventually be less of an issue. And then the second thing is, as we came into this year, a lot of the retailers that had terrible 2020s were starting to see improvement. And they were starting to, some of this, again, is a function of the stimulus. Some of it's a function of pent-up demand. And some of it is like, let's just see how this plays out. So I think there was a lot of the people, the banks or others that might have forced people, or landlords that might have forced people into protection. The ones that were already on the edge filed last year. The ones that are on the edge now, I think it's more of a wait and see attitude.
Right.
So I suspect when we get into, and the holidays are coming up, back to school. So it's not a great time to try to force store closings or force bankruptcies. But we get on the other side, it'll be a little bit more clear who the winners and losers are. We'll have, I think, a more normal perspective of what the retail trends look like.
Let's talk about Rent the Runway, another IPO following, Warby Parker, a bunch of other folks doing IPOs. What are your thoughts on Rent the Runway?
Well, number one, I do think there's this IPO boom, companies rushing to the markets, I guess because the valuations are so frothy, and a number of these businesses have certainly been around for a while, and some of their investors, I'm sure, are looking to take some money off the table. So Rent the Runway, which is one of the more, I guess, high profile disruptor brands, just filed, and I'm going to be like a broken record on this. The thing that has really struck me with these IPOs is these businesses are much smaller than I assumed they were. Rent the Runway doesn't even do a couple $100 million a year in total revenue, which is, kind of the sales of one really good department store. Like that's not a massive business. The really interesting thing, they lost more money last year than they made in revenue, which is pretty impressive. I mean, a negative, 115% operating margin. Now, again, the argument is always you got to make these investments. And certainly compared to Warby Parker, they were they're in the fashion business. They're in much more of the special event, wear to work kind of clothing. So they absolutely got hit hard by COVID. So it's a little bit hard to extrapolate from their last, 5-6 quarters of business what this is going to look like. But as an investment, I mean, you wouldn't normally go to market with a negative sales trajectory, basically, and mounting losses. And our buddy Dan McCarthy, maybe we'll put the link in the show notes. Our buddy Dan McCarthy took a look at some of their churn rates, and they didn't look super healthy. So it's interesting timing for a business where the fundamentals either are very hard to understand or they don't look good. So it's just a parade of these brands going to market. I keep calling it profitless prosperity, right? Like, everybody's so excited. Look at these great brands. And then you look under the cover and it's like, well, they're basically lighting a big pile of cash on fire every month. So,
that's a good wrap on the news of the week. Once again, reminder to anyone who's listening to go check us out on YouTube, and anyone who's watching on YouTube, the extended version, because we chat for a while. So the bonus content that's on YouTube, be sure and subscribe and follow us on the podcast. All right, well, let's get on with the rest of the show. The back half of the show, we got Robbie, Kellman, Baxter talking about subscriptions, and it's a wonderful interview. So let's have a listen.
We are delighted to welcome Robbie, Kellman, Baxter to the podcast. We're going to talk about the membership economy and all things related to that. So it's a hot area. We're excited to have you here and talk about all that stuff. But before we dive in, we usually like to have our guests just give us a minute or two on their background and their professional journey and, what led you to this moment where you're on the podcast with us.
So my journey to the world of subscription and membership models started actually about 20 years ago. I was consulting to Netflix, and I fell in love with their business model. I had been both a strategy consultant and a product manager in Silicon Valley before hanging out my own shingle, and I was working with a pretty broad range of companies. And when I saw Netflix's model, I just fell in love with their, the recurring revenue, but also all the little pieces that I noticed that were just a little bit different from how other businesses were run. And I wanted to understand what made it work so well. And as I was falling in love with their model, other people were too. And I started to get calls from people who would say, hey, we want to be the Netflix of pretty much fill in the blank. We want to be the Netflix of news, of music, bicycle parts, dental pain management, anesthesias. Everybody had an idea for how to be like Netflix. And I started to try to put words and frameworks around what does it mean to be like Netflix, and what is it that they're doing that is replicable, and also what are they doing that is unique to them that you shouldn't copy unless you are Netflix. And that was really the beginning of my journey of writing and thinking about and researching what I've come to call the membership economy, this massive transformation as pretty much every industry is moving towards a model of optimizing around a long-term relationship with the customer, where they treat that customer in the way that they'd treat a long-standing member.
And I guess it was 2015 when your first book came out, entitled "The Membership Economy." So it sounds like the Netflix experience was the thing that really propelled you. How else did you pull together the ideas for that book? We're always, when we have authors on, and being an author myself, we're always a little interested in kind of how you came to put those ideas into a form of a book.
Yeah, it was a long time coming. Actually, I'm a very methodical and careful person, and I have notes for the membership economy that went back more than 10 years prior. So 2004, I started putting together notes for this book that was going to be about what are these companies that I've been working with? What do they have in common? What are the frameworks that others could apply? Why is this so magical? What are the shared attributes? And, after Netflix, I worked with a bunch of companies, including Intuit's PayCycle. I worked with Oracle when they were launching some of their SaaS businesses. I worked with SurveyMonkey and its predecessor, Zoomerang. And with each one of those clients, I got a little more clear on kind of what were these elements. And I wrote articles and I made notes, but really the book came out of a lot of time in the trenches, working kind of shoulder to shoulder with companies that were trying to justify subscription pricing by building long-term relationships, trusted relationships, preference with their customers. I ended up writing the book almost as a 1 pound business card to explain to people my weird way of looking at everything through the lens of membership and why I thought it was so powerful. And my thought was, if somebody is thinking about working with me, they can look through the book and then they can either say, this is crazy, or this is really, right? This is crazy, or, which a lot of people at the beginning, they did not get it.
But at least they bought the book, right? So that's the good part. At least they're looking through the book and deciding you're crazy, as opposed to.
You're an author, so you understand this. They were not buying the book. I was giving them the book. My initial plan was to give the book away truly as a 1 pound business card. Like, oh, you want to know more about me? Here's 288 pages about me. And if you find any of those pages interesting, give me a call. And if you don't find them interesting, then you probably don't want to talk business with me.
It separates out the riffraff pretty quickly.
I love that, a 1 pound business card. Listen, you've been thinking about this economy, as you put it, this ecosystem for like 10 years. Subscriptions have been around for a long time, one way, shape, or another, Columbia House Records, or, some way, shape, or form that people can subscribe to something and, whether it's a loyalty program or clubs or whatever, and get things in the mail. It's funny, it's kind of had a renaissance back and forth like many kind of things do, but what's changed from how things have evolved? Is it this intersection of technology that has enabled it? Is it consumer behavior? What is it that sets this framework in your mind for the modern subscription economy?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think first of all, you're right that subscriptions have been around forever. Charles Dickens publishes books on a subscription model where you paid monthly to get installments of his novels. So subscriptions have been around for a long time, but I think in the last, let's say, 15 years or so, technology has extended the infrastructure that enables trusted relationships, ongoing relationships, the ability to pay somebody on an ongoing basis directly from your credit card, directly from your bank account, the ability to track a consumer's behavior through their digital profile, the ability to aggregate data, to serve data at very low costs. All of those technology advancements kind of created a painter's palette for new business model design. And I think organizations are always trying, or the good ones are always trying to create business models that better align with the desired impact from the customer, right? So I buy a car, I get a bundle of benefits, right? I get this kind of car. So let's say I buy a minivan. So I have the ability to carry a lot of people and a lot of stuff. It's not very cool, right? It takes up a lot of space. I am responsible for maintaining it. I am responsible for storing it. I can trick it out however I want. I can paint the sides. I can raise it or lower it. That's the bundle of benefits and costs I have. I have to pay all the money outright, and in 2 years, it will no longer be a new car. If you unbundle that, different consumers might want different combinations of benefits. You might say, I just want to get to work and home every day, and I don't need to carry anything, and I don't need to transport passengers, and I don't have any place to park. You have a different need. Or you might say, you know what, during the week, I want to drive the minivan or the SUV, but on the weekend, I like driving a sports car. So Porsche came up with their Porsche Drive subscription, where you have access to a bunch of different cars in a fleet. So I think that this is all about organizations rethinking their business model and trying to solve the ongoing issue. I want access to a bundle of benefits without maybe the burdens of ownership.
Amazon's early examples where they had that one touch button could just go away because it just felt like it was even just too much work for the consumer to press a button. How do these things come together in your mind? That the experience, the reduction of the friction, and then this customization. Is there a meeting place for those two things?
Yeah, I think absolutely. The way I think about it is an organization that wants an ongoing relationship with a customer, regardless of industry, is making a promise to that customer. As long as you have this goal, or as long as you have this ongoing problem to solve, we will do whatever we can to solve it in the most efficient way possible in exchange for your loyalty, in exchange for you coming to us first, preferring us at every turn, or maybe even paying us on a regular cadence. You have the opportunity as the vendor, as the organization, to say, what other value can we lay in, right? One thing is certainly we can send it to her on a regular cadence so she never runs out. Yeah. We can also maybe customize the duration or the frequency. We could even customize the different items in the package. We could even customize the formula. We could provide her guidance, so I think about commerce, content, and community as three levers for layering in value. So you could, just on the commerce one alone, the customization is infinite, but then you can also layer in access to other people who are trying to have good skin, experts who can help me make my skin better, and community, and content, right? Articles and videos and how to. And what we're seeing is organizations that focus on a forever promise and then layer in benefits across categories that's quite unusual historically. We have content and we have physical product, and we're connecting you with other people who love those products as much as you do. Community.
We took a 2x4 to it, and we just said we're gonna guarantee you the price and no price increases. And we found that in the early days accelerated adoption. In other words, the price you buy it in 2019 will be the price we sell it to you in 2022. And that seemed to be a pretty interesting value equation as well. Do you see any of that happening, or is it?
Yeah, cost certainty is a very, when I think about all the benefits that subscriptions offer, efficiency and cost certainty are very often what I would call the acquisition benefits, the reason people sign up. And in fact, with Netflix, that first company that I really worked with on this model, I think of their forever promise as being a large selection of high quality, professionally created video content delivered in the most efficient way possible with cost certainty. And so, 15 years ago, most efficient way possible was DVDs in your mailbox. Today, it's streaming to your phone and everywhere else. And it used to be, the big selection of content used to be content from other people. And today it's their own content. And the no late fees and the monthly, they only do monthly, right? You can't do an annual subscription to Netflix. And you can always cancel because that's really important to them. Those are I think still their three core elements of their promise.
One of the things I think is really interesting about some of your work, and it really made me revisit some things that I guess I've come to believe is, on the one hand, well, we talked about earlier, subscriptions are not new, loyalty programs are not new, but certainly technology has allowed many things to be possible that just weren't even conceived of or possible a bunch of years ago. But some of these ideas around, it's pretty much marketing a 101, that retention, we're trying to, earn back your acquisition costs, retaining customers, lifetime value, that's a fairly old idea. This idea of trying to understand customers at a deeper level, not an old idea. But I still see a lot of companies really get too focused on or unable to get to that deeper level of what customer problem they're trying to solve, sort of like the customer jobs to be done or solution orientation, bundling, unbundling, all that kind of stuff. But also at the same time, not really understand the consumer psychology very well. And one of the things you talk about, I can't remember if it's in the Membership Economy or the Forever Transaction, your more recent book, is this idea about the desire for customers to belong to something. And as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a little bit where I think you make the distinction between membership and kind of the traditional subscription model. So with that long-winded question, I don't know if that you understand what I guess I'm trying to get to how do, what do brands need to do to not only understand the potential of technology, but to understand really how do you become more customer centric? How do you deliver sort of a higher order set of customer benefits, not just getting something off your to-do list?
Yeah. For me, what I encourage, when I was writing, especially the first book, The Membership Economy, I was really trying to think about why membership, why not subscription, and what distinguishes a membership economy company. And what I came to was that subscription pricing is a tactic, and you earn the right to charge with subscription pricing by making an ongoing promise to your customer and treating them like a member, treating them like somebody who belongs, who's not going anywhere, who maybe has your home phone number. How do you design a business if you know that person's going to be around to give you feedback, and you're depending on them to be your primary customer, primary business driver? So what I tell organizations is you need to have a member mindset culture. A membership mindset where you treat your customers the way you would treat them if they were members. And that once you do that, you start to see everything through that lens and you say, oh, wow, that means that we really need to change how we onboard our new members. It changes how we build out our products. It changes what we sell, what the array is, what the assortment is, what kind of services we provide around it, how we charge. One decision that you might make is, when you have that relationship, is, and we're going to charge as a subscription. But you don't have to have subscription pricing to have that mindset, that way of thinking and feeling and treating the customer.
And what would you say are some of the barriers? Well, maybe two sides of the coin. Which companies do you think have really, others than some we've talked about already, have really embraced this notion and made it part of their business model that perhaps some of our listeners will be familiar with? And then I guess the flip side of that is what are the barriers to making this happen when you get companies that are interested in it, but for whatever reason can't pull it off?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many good examples now because so many companies are doing such innovative things. But, the biggest, big ones, I would say, one of them is Amazon with Amazon Prime, which is, some would say a loyalty program, a premium loyalty program. But if you take a step back and say, what's their promise? Their promise is, we're going to have everything you need in a really safe way, great assortment and kind of security and confidence, right? That, if you want to get your returns, if you want to get your money back, all of that, you feel secure there. And they, with Amazon Prime, they've layered in more and more benefits to better deliver on their goal, which is the easiest way to buy, right? They say we're moving all friction from the buying process, which includes, the things I need are at different stores. It takes too long to come. I don't like going to a store. All these different reasons. And one by one, they're removing those barriers through this focus on membership. And it's interesting because as a retailer, when you're a retailer, almost by nature, your business is going to be episodic, non-predictable, transactional, right? When I need something, I go in and I need different things at different times. But they've really done a good job both with Amazon Prime and also with their subscribe and save offerings to, build ongoing relationships, to say, what are the habits that my members wish that they could have with me, and how do I enable that? How do I optimize around that? And what it's done is sort of disruption proofed them, because consumers aren't looking for alternatives. When you take off your consumer hat and put on your member hat, you stop looking for alternatives and you say, this company is how I'm going to solve my problems. Another great example that didn't have subscription was Apple in the hardware space, right? People would say, oh, I'm an Apple person. This is like 10, 15 years ago, right? And they'd go into the store and say, I need a computer. And Apple would say, oh, with your needs, you should buy this one. You're like, okay, I'll buy that one. Then you come back and you say, I need a phone. And they're like, okay, buy this one if you're that kind of person. And then you come back and say, I need a printer. And they say, oh, we don't sell printers. And you say, oh, well, then what should I do, Apple? And Apple says, you should buy this printer from this vendor. And you say, okay, I'll do that. And so even though it wasn't a subscription, they weren't using subscription pricing, they absolutely had a membership mindset. They were solving the whole problem, which is, how do I put together a technology footprint for my needs that works?
I love this thread of the mindset, because as I look through your book, The Forever Transaction, which is a great book, by the way, we're going to put links to both your books in the show notes. Encourage everybody to pick it up. Way more than a business card, by the way. It's way more than a business card. Amazon's interesting because, of course, you've got a subscription within a subscription, right? So you have a number of products that they will send to you directly. But what resonated the most with me with your book was about, okay, I want to get this mindset and culture. Can you talk to the barriers or the enablers, conversely, of creating that cultural impact? We've talked about technology, we've talked about process. Let's talk about the people part. So you want to introduce this mindset into your organization. What are the challenges, and where have you seen people really win? Just transforming their organization.
Yeah, well, so the biggest challenges I think comes around. Well, the starting point is metrics. So a lot of organizations are very much quarterly capitalists, right? This is the number that we need by the end of March. And everybody, whatever we have to do, if we have to stick in some late fees, if we have to raise our prices a tiny bit, if we have to lower our prices and fire sale everything to hit that aggregate number, who cares what it does to our relationships in the future? Let's just get it done this quarter.
Worry about that. Well, we will worry about that next quarter kind of thinking, right? Yeah,
we'll worry about that next quarter after I've got my bonus, honestly, and I've left and gone to a competitor. And, that culture, a lot of times when companies are moving to subscription pricing, to a member mindset, they'll say, we want the subscription revenue, but we also want to hit our quarterly numbers. When we have to choose between the two of them, we're going to prefer hitting our quarterly number. I think that's a huge problem, right? You have to be very focused on the long game. What you're trying to do is build an ongoing relationship with an individual customer and optimize for lifetime value. That changes a lot of things. It changes how you design your product. It changes support. Instead of support being wait till somebody calls with a problem and then try to get them off the phone as quickly as possible, your customer success team is actually trying to ensure that they're getting the value they're entitled to. So let's say that you have a subscription, like a clothing rental that's very popular right now, a subscription rent, clothing business, right? If the clothes you're getting aren't the right ones, or if you don't know how to accessorize them, you might not wear them. And if you're not getting the value you're entitled to, you might cancel. So suddenly it becomes the responsibility of this retailer to proactively help you style your clothes, right? And so you suddenly need stylists on your team in a way that you might not have before, to have them, available on the phone or on the site to help customers. And, marketing in traditional businesses, marketing ends pretty much at the moment of transaction. But in a membership model, after that moment of transaction, you have to continue selling them on the product so that they use it, so that they get the value they're entitled to and they recognize that value. Because if they're not using it and if they're not recognizing the value, they're going to cancel. So every role, I could go through every single functional area, every role changes when an organization moves to a member mindset. And sometimes in an organization, when they have both businesses running, there's a lot of conflict. Which hat am I supposed to be wearing? Well,
and I wanted to just talk about one, maybe it's a tactical thing, but one thing we ran into is a lot about our business as the retailer was introducing new. And the concern was, or the worry that if you had so many of your customers on a subscription getting the same thing over and over again, it eliminates the newness and the freshness of the brand, and they start to go somewhere else looking for newness and freshness. Is that something that you've dealt with?
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing is it depends on what your promise is to your customers. So if your customers are fashionistas, then your subscription better have new stuff every month, right? Because that's what they're coming to you for. They're saying, what I want is I always want to look current and I always want to be surprised, right? That's one ideal customer. I am not that ideal customer. I want to look appropriate and look my best, which might mean that I wear similar styles or I wear, kind of the same things. So the promise to me and the way you layered in value for my offer would be very different. And then for the example you gave earlier of somebody with, makeup or skincare products, they might want, if there's a major advance in technology that creates a better product that's going to have a better result on my face, I would like you to layer that in. But I don't want to be out there looking. I mean, most people don't want to be out there looking for what's the best product for my face and taking a risk of getting, a breakout or, a rash as a result of trying something new. So I think that what it comes down to is knowing your customer. And then, as you pointed out, staying relevant. If you're not delivering in the best way possible, the most efficient way possible on their promise, they're going to probably end up realizing that there's better options out there, or more likely what's going to happen is they'll stay loyal because they took off their consumer hat and they've got their membership hat and they're not looking for alternatives. But new prospects are going to kind of peek in the windows of your organization and say, oh, what they're selling is tired. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Well, Robbie, I know we're coming up on time, and I've got about 27 other questions to ask you. But so people are just going to have to read both your books and hire Robbie to help you. But I do have one question that it's come up in different forms on the podcast a number of times, and it's really around whether newer brands that aren't held to traditional profit standards or typical metrics, whether they have an advantage just in general in creating this kind of amazing experience. I would, nothing about it in the context of this membership model, but a lot of the digitally native brands, the argument could be made that, well, they've got so much money to spend, they can kind of overinvest in product design, they can overinvest in marketing, they can overinvest in various aspects of the customer experience. And then the legacy brands have a hard time keeping up with them because, they've got to hit their quarterly numbers. So I guess my question, particularly since you've been in the Valley for a while, is do you think there is a fundamental advantage to a newer brand that can really invest in the long term or for the long term compared to a brand that's been around for a while and not only has to change their culture, but they have to change customers' expectations, and they have to, well, they don't have to, but typically the pressure is that short-term payback?
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked earlier what's driving this membership economy. And I should have added that I think that this culture, this startup culture, this Silicon Valley culture is really contributing to it because, I talked about how, subscriptions are a long game and you're really focusing on long-term relationships, which means in the short term, you might be losing a little bit of money as you build trust and get to know your customer. Having a deep-pocketed investor who has a 7-year time horizon before they need payback gives you a lot of cushion to invest in those long-term relationships. And if you're a company that kind of lives and dies by your quarterly numbers, it's very hard to compete against that. And actually, I've seen a lot of closely held family-owned businesses do very well in the membership and subscription base precisely because they think on a long-term horizon and they don't have to answer to anonymous, quarterly-oriented shareholders.
Yeah, well, it's I think you talk about Clayton Christensen, the innovator's dilemma, in your book a little bit, if I recall.
Yes.
But this is, I guess, another aspect of that. Well, as we find ourselves saying, much like the news anchors we want to be, we're going to have to leave it there. But appreciate all the great ideas, a lot of things I think that are really, really interesting to contemplate as folks think about their strategy. As Michael said, we'll put the links to both of Robbie's books in the show notes. I encourage you to check those out, as well as other content that Robbie's got out there. And we just want to thank you so much for making time to chat with us on the podcast.
Oh, thank you both for having me. I'm a big fan.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast platforms so you can catch up with all our great interviews. Subscribe so that just automatically shows up. Tell your friends, and also in new insights and new episodes will show up every week. So tell your friends. Because that will help us share the word, the good wisdom. Now, be sure and check out, us out on our new YouTube channel. Not so new anymore. We got a couple episodes up there, and just look for Remarkable Retail.
And I'm Steve Dennis. You can check out more of my work at my website, stephenpdennis.com, or on Forbes, or on Twitter. And please check out my second edition of my book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption, available just about everywhere books are sold.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast and a bunch of other stuff. You can find me on LinkedIn, learn about me on meleblanc.co. All right, Steve, great episode. Look forward to chatting again next week. Be safe and have a great rest of your day.